Let's talk about the stakeholders for this case study and through the lens of what we've learned in our text and our materials. First and foremost, we talked about this a little bit in chapter 1, but when we talk about stakeholders in any special education or support situation in schools, we need to make sure we're using a definition of families that is inclusive. So there are several examples of a definition of families in your course text this week, one from the Census Bureau, one from IDEA, and a lot through cultural lenses. Make sure you check your own definition and your own actions according to the community that you're in, but also against the standards of inclusion. This case is pretty typical. But maybe not our norm anymore. It's in some districts in schools, it is not common to have two parents living in the same home. Parents might not mean mom and dad. You need to just be real careful and check yourself a little bit when you look at the word and talk about families. When I was working in the public schools, it was a colloquialism. It was part of the area, but I used to say, who are your people? I would ask my new students or my special education students, who are your people? Who do you live with? Who do you see every day? Who are your people that support and provide you with the things that you need? There are legal requirements about who is required, but you may invite that student's people to those meetings with permission from that student or from that family unit. So just consider that. Next, let's talk about the model of trusting partnerships provided by our textbook. When you think about who should be involved, you need to think about that sunshine model from our text. And you need to think about building school capacity, which probably isn't happening for Matthew at his new school. You need to think about student transitions. In this case, Matthew's family is transitioning to a new community, and Matthew's transitioning to a new school and classroom. And you need to think about attendance at meetings. You need to think about the lack of meetings in this case study, and you need to think about purposefully inviting families in to be a part of the meetings that need to be had in order to make decisions about students. Think about the people at the table for this case study chronologically again. Think about what meetings probably looked like kindergarten through second grade and in third grade at Matthew's old school. Think about what we know about an IEP team meeting, who needs to be there. Think about what we know now about multi-tiered systems of support being a team effort. And think about the number of people at the table in his history at his old school as compared to the data that we have for his new school. It really sounds like Mrs. Winters has a seat at the table. She might own the table. She could be the only person at the table here. So think about those two things in comparison and in contrast. When we talk about the models and the lens at which we view this case, but the people that have a seat at the table also are using to view this case, I think we can kind of throw out the charity model. We don't have a lot of sympathy or empathy at his new school. That might have been in place a little bit at his old school. We don't have the data for that. But we really have to consider the medical model and the social model here. And I think this case is a really good example of the difference in the two. And let's talk about it again historically and chronologically. Kindergarten through second grade ultimately ending up in a successful third grade year. I feel like those teachers and those school support staff and that family were engaging in the social model. They were looking at the barriers to Matthew's, well, not always, but they ended up looking at the barriers to Matthew's success in school, completing his assignments, and socially. And they made accommodations to those barriers so that they were lowered or no longer present so that Matthew could feel successful and feel comfortable at school. Let's flip that to Mrs. Winters. She's a brand new teacher, brand new situation, but Mrs. Winters is coming strictly from the medical model. Something is wrong with Matthew that doesn't fit, and it needs to be fixed. and she's not really going to have a part in fixing it. And you can see where the family by the third grade year with the social model was joyous and really happy about, and Matthew was too. Matthew was happy at school. Whereas when we apply the medical model, there's instant frustration. So consider those lenses, develop those more if you choose to write about this and turn this one in, but really dig in to our resources about the models of disability with which we view things from our previous weeks.